Segment 4, The New Evil Empire. Victor Davis Hanson, quote, oil-rich Russia, deprived of its communist-era empire, seems to find lost imperial prestige and influence by being for everything the United States is against, selling nuclear material to Iran, providing weapons to Hugo Chavez's Venezuela, bullying neighbors over energy supplies. Close quote. What are the Russians thinking?
They're thinking, wow, we've got a president and we've got an administration that for a brief window of opportunity really wants to reach out and really does believe that the deterioration in Russian-American relations was because of George Bush and not because of things like cutting off gas to Eastern Europe or pressuring the Balkans or pressuring Europe or pressuring the former Soviet republics, any of that. And this is a time really to reach out, praise this administration to the skies, and then take them to the cleaners. And the result is that they're helping Iran get a bomb, they're helping arm our enemies, and they like the status quo.
Here's the piece that doesn't, the piece of the puzzle. It's a big piece of the puzzle that doesn't make sense to me. Russian mortality rate extremely high, birth rate extremely low. Their economy, almost zero. It's purely extractive industries. That is to say, they have the only wealth they have is because they happen to sit on top of land that contains oil, minerals, natural gas, which they can sell to genuinely productive economies. Yes. This is not a good long-term picture. The Muslims, I'm not talking about the Kazakhstan and the this stand and the other stand, but within Russia proper itself, Chechnya. Exactly, you've got a large Muslim population, and the birth rate is so much greater in the Muslim population in Russia than that of the Russians proper, that by 2050, Russia will be more than 50% Muslim. So if you're Vladimir Putin and you are trying to preserve some kind of Mother Russia,
wait. This is an argument that leaders and
they ought to be doing business with us. They ought to be begging us for alliances.
Peter, that's like saying that on June 22nd, 1941, the World War II was essentially over. From the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Russian border, from the Arctic Circle to the Sahara Desert, it was all a German Reich. And why in the world would Adolf Hitler invade Russia when Russia was giving them more natural resources to do things like bomb Britain than they ever got when they actually occupied the country for 4 years? So it was absolute lunacy to act against his own self-interest. But he did. And why? Because he had some crackpot notion of Übermenschen and the Ukraine and the Slavs. And this is the same thing with Putin. Thinks he's angry about the Cold War. He's angry at the loss of empire. He's angry that we stopped him. We helped kill Russians in Afghanistan. He's angry. And you could sit down and you could say, Vladimir, what you did in Chechnya is the future. You guys are, wow, you've got problems with radical Islam and you got all the things you delineated. It's not in your interest to be estranged from the United States, your natural ally, and it's an emotional thing. And he likes the idea that we get tangled up in Iraq, we get tangled up in Afghanistan, we get tangled up in places with Israel in the Middle East, we get tangled up with the Iranian bomb. And this is all good that and by the way, the more that we get tangled up, and if there's going to be any preemptive strike on Iran, or the price of oil goes up. Chaos makes Russian profits as far as oil goes.
So what you are asserting here, Victor, is even though we're talking about Russia in the 21st century, you're asserting something that comes from your understanding of the classics. This is Greek tragedy. This is the perversity of human nature, choosing the boneheaded course of action.
Even though it wasn't a direct quote from the historian Thucydides, he doesn't say that states attack other states because they want their their soil to make pots, or they want olive oil or something. They do it for honor, fear, and self-interest. They act on emotional responses. So asking me why Russia would act against their self-interest is the same thing of saying, why in the world would Argentina, in the middle of a depression with a dictator, invade the Falklands against the British Navy?
Okay.
People do stupid things for emotional reasons that I think have a lot to do with their fears and their sense of honor.
One more question about Russia. Let me quote Illie Berman of the American Foreign Policy Council. He's writing in the Washington Times, quote, "The bulk of Russia's strategic resources are concentrated in the country's inhospitable Far East, Siberia and East. This is a territory that a dying Russia, low birth rates, will find increasingly difficult to harness, let alone to populate in the years ahead. China doesn't have that problem. Again, can't Putin see this? His problems with China dwarf any problems he has with us. Why isn't he?
I agree, absolutely. I think if you could sit down, you could convince him, and then he would still smile at you and say, you're absolutely right, but he has certain reasons for being angry at the United States, or at least seeing us have problems. And the more problems we have, as I said, the more chaos we have, the less smug and secure we are as the winner of the Cold War, the more that the world is tense, that energy prices stay high. But he's got a rendezvous with the Chinese along with many other things like demographic and health issues of the population.